Alright, let me show you guys one other trick that is potentially useful here, and that is if you were in Linux and you think that this terminal is just entirely too small and you wish to make um, the the font larger. If you hit Control Shift and then the plus sign, you can actually make it a little bit bigger. You can actually make it a lot bigger if you want to, and then Control minus sign gets you back to where you were. So I'm going to actually leave this up here. I think that should make it a little bit easier for you guys to see what's going on. So the next thing that I want to talk about is a command that's called su, and I think this actually stands for switch user, but if it doesn't, that's what everybody thinks it stands for, so it's probably fine. And what that's going to do is if I want to be another user on the system, I can do something like this: su root, and then that's going to tell Linux to go ahead and change who I'm logged into instead of Garrett to be root. Now root is the administrative user in Linux, and I hope that you guys all saved your root password, because what it's going to ask you when you do this is it's going to say, well, if you are supposed to be root, then the way I'm going to verify that is that you actually have the root password. So if I don't know the root password here, this probably isn't going to work. But what you can see when I do this is that it actually tells me here that I am no longer G Smith. I'm root. I'm still on the same computer here, and I'm still in my home directory, but I'm in root's home directory now instead of Garrett's home directory. So what this does is this just is a way for you to switch from one user to another user. Now, for a lot of the things that we're going to be doing in Linux, for some of the administration stuff, or some of the things like if we decide we're going to add a new hard drive, we're going to need to be the root user, or we're going to at least need to use root permissions. We'll talk about how we can do that. But as a general rule, it's best practice if I don't log in as root all the time, unless I have a particular thing that I need to do as root. And the reason for this is that if you are the root user and you accidentally click on something, or you try to remove a file and you type the wrong thing, you could remove a whole bunch of files just because you are. A lot of the Linux interface, especially we're on a command line here, doesn't do the stuff like what you guys are probably used to if you're on an iPhone or even Windows or something like that, where if you're going to do something that might be bad, it's like, whoa, 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 are you sure you want to do this? Linux a lot of times has no backsies. If you accidentally remove a file, it's gone. There's unless you're doing system backups or something, which is a little bit beyond what we're going to get in this class. But what I want you guys to see is that for some of the stuff that we are doing, you'll need to be root. But as a general rule, we don't want to be an administrator if we're not doing something that is sort of administrator stuff. Now, exit in this context is going to kick me out of that root account, and I go back to the GSmith account. So here, the exit command didn't work in exactly the same way, but it still sort of makes sense, because if I switch to one user and then I'm ready to go back to the previous user and I'm done with that, I can go ahead and hit exit, and it logs me out as the root user. So you can see that after I type exit, I'm still back as GSmith here. So, but SU is going to be something, SU and then sudo. We'll talk about that one in a bit. That's going to be stuff that we um, are going to be using later in the class when we get into sort of administrative things. The other thing that I want you guys to see is this idea of something that is called a shell metacharacter. And metacharacters are characters that are not going to be interpreted literally. So I think the easiest way to explain what this is just to go ahead and demonstrate what they are. But there's a whole bunch of different shell metacharacters that the book lists. I'm not going to go over every one of them here because I think that would just be kind of boring. But what I want you guys to see is that um, if I do something like this, the echo um, the echo command is just going to print out whatever I type in hi there. If I type in echo hi there, I'm going to get something that says hi there. Now, right now that doesn't seem like it would be terribly exciting or useful, but when we get into shell scripting, this becomes very important. But what I want you guys to see is that right now, all these letters were just interpreted as if they were normal letters, right? None of those were actually meta characters. But what if I do something like this, echo my shell is shell, the same sort of thing happens, right? But if I put a $sign in front of this, you can see that something different happens here. And what's going on here is that if I put a $sign in front of a word, it's gonna try to that's your way of telling the shell that this is something that is a variable, and I don't want you to just print out the variable. I want you to go ahead and figure out what the variable is. So if I'm wondering what my shell is, I can just type echo shell, and it's going to give me the shell that I'm using, which is we'll talk about file locations and what all that means in a bit. But what I want you guys to see, the purpose of this little exercise right here is to show how different this will act if you have a $sign in front of something or if you don't. Now, I'm kind of cheating here because I knew that shell is a variable. The system typically sets that up, and there's nothing I did to set that up. There's nothing you had to do. This should just work because there are certain variables that the shell knows about and sets when just when you log in, basically. So I wouldn't expect to say, well, what if I try to treat a word as a variable and it's not a variable. There's no variable called howdy in here, so I just get something something that's blank. So one of the things we'll do later in this class is talk about how to set variables and kind of where they can be stored, and how we can figure out what's going on, how we can list all the variables that are in memory. But this is one of the shell meta characters that I want you guys to be aware of. Some of the things that are in here are meta characters that we actually won't use or explain for another couple chapters, but they stick them all in here to talk about kind of what this just get you familiar with the idea. Something else that I want you guys to see here is that the hash. The hashtag for you kids that are on the Twitters is essentially a comment line for Linux. So if I type something like this and then echo hi there, this isn't actually going to do anything at all because I've just told it that that line is a comment. Now I know that doesn't seem terribly useful to you either, but I've seen some Linux guys, if they have a big long complicated command that they've been trying to figure out, they'll type it but put a hash like that at the beginning of their line if they don't want to run it, just so they have it in their file history and they can go find it by using the up arrow later. But the takeaway that I want you guys to see from here is that there are certain meta characters that are called meta characters because they have a special meaning to the shell, and they're going to change the behavior of the shell when you use them. We don't have to understand how to use all of them right now, but I want you guys to at least sort of be familiar with the concept. One of the other examples here is using a slash. So if I actually wanted to tell the shell to interpret something literally, what I could do is echo my shell is, well, let me take out the quotes here, my shell is, and then backslash like that, shell, and then you can see that what this is doing something that's very weird because it printed this out as if it was the variable, right? But this is not here. So what this does is this tells the shell, I want you to take whatever comes right after this and treat it as if it's a literal variable. So what this is a meta character that told the shell not to treat this as a meta character, just to actually print out the $sign. So that's what that is. There's a couple. The book has an example on page 75 of kind of ways you can use echo with quotes and single quotes and double quotes, and kind of how that changes the behavior of it. If you want to go ahead and take a look at that, that's something that just key in the my shell is shell and the various ways that they use and see what it does. Now, um, the other thing that I think the last thing is that's useful to talk about here is the backtick. And this one is a little bit of a strange example, but I like it, and this is actually extremely useful when you get sort of more into Linux. And that is if you put something in backticks, it will run it as if it's a command, and then, well, so if I do something like echo today is backtick date, what this is going to do is this tells Linux anything in backticks, I'm going to run that first, and then I'm going to take the output of that command and I'm going to put it into the command. So it's going to take the output of date and then feed that information into the echo command. So if I do something like that, you can see that what I've gotten is today is, and then it's going to print out the output from date. So the thing that's interesting about using backticks as shell meta characters is that this is going to go ahead and run whatever's in the backticks first, and then it's going to take the output from that and feed it into the other commands. So all echo is seeing here is today is, and then it just sees the output from that command. So it runs that first and then puts the whole thing into the command that's not in backticks. So that's kind of how that works. So I think that's about all we want to talk about here. The next video we're going to talk about how to get help.